All right, boys, we have a micro stream for a quick conversation. Okay, he needs 2 minutes. Where'd I get this jacket? It looks dank as fuck. It's just a normal jacket. I bought this in Poland. It's literally just a normal winter coat. What do you guys... It doesn't look like anything. It's just a normal winter coat. What the fuck? Are we fucked? Is the world fucked? No, what the fuck?
Hello?
All right, what's up, buddy?
What's up, buddy? Sorry. I've imitated that a few times. I watched so many of your videos.
Yeah.
It's pretty insightful, actually, because it kind of lends more into your mind state, which I feel like you're pretty reasonable overall.
Sure.
Actually. And
I like to think I am.
To be fair, I didn't really... I didn't know that much about you before the last time I talked to you, so
Gotcha.
Maybe that was shaky ground.
Yeah, it's okay.
So I've noticed, and I watched your Lauren Southern debate with her, and I actually generally kind of agree with your sentiment on why have such extremism on both sides of the immigration policy. It makes more sense to obviously you don't want to just stop all immigration. You want to sort of have a reasonable way of doing it. There's benefits, all that thing. But one thing that I think, and I heard another kind of discussion you had with a guy, a caller, was about you seem to compare a lot of the time Christianity to Islam, and you kind of just seem to draw parallels with the extremism within them.
Kind of. Well, basically, usually if I'm calling attention to Christianity, what I'm trying to say is, look at how fucked up Christianity has been in the past. Notice that it's not as fucked up anymore. What are the reasons for this? A lot of these people still identify as Christians, so obviously there's something a little bit more going on than the religion. It's usually why I draw parallels. But
okay. Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, I feel like, so your crux of it would basically be saying that from a political, cultural perspective, Christianity, that's why it's adapted, because it's been in the West. I've even heard you say that. Is that right?
Oh,
because it's been
a
in the
little
West.
bit, yeah. But I thought we were specifically talking about your tweet.
Yeah, right. So
Sure.
I'm getting to that.
Okay, all right.
Right, and so that being the case, then how? I mean, the fact that Islam is the way it is, and that Christianity is the way it is, for the most part, I would argue, is actually in the religion itself. For the text of the religions, the preachings of the religions.
Absolutely not. Every progress we've made socially, we've had to drag religious people kicking and screaming into social progressivism. They do not come along nicely. This is why I took issue with your tweet about how Islam is worse for the United States than Christians. Christians are 100% far more damaging to the integrity of the United States than fucking Muslims are. I can't even think of what. Well, I guess my question is that's not even an opinion. What are some major issues you think that Muslims are causing today in the United States?
Well, okay. I mean, again, that's kind of like a trick question, because depending on how you define issues. I mean, if you want to
any issue. No, what issues today are Muslims causing for the United States? Any issues?
Again, I would cite radical Islamic terrorism.
Okay, how much of a problem is radical Islamic terrorism in the United States? If you're the average American in the United States.
Okay, so then again, you're defining it in the context of your everyday civilian life, which is different than America's interest in general. Would you agree? Okay, so then that you're framing it in a very specific way.
Okay, how about America's interest in general? How often does we were going to do this, but then Islamic terrorism happened, so now we're not doing this anymore? Even for our foreign political interests, how big of a deal is...
I would say it's the chief concern right now.
Yeah, it is, but because the public, ISIS is fucking nothing. ISIS is on the way out. In 2 years, they're not even going to exist anymore. What is this huge issue? This overblown bullshit of Islamic terrorism is the biggest non-issue that's been blown up by the media and the right so much. Can you give me?
Think Islamic terrorism is a non-issue?
Yeah, easily, of course. Compared to the other problems that we face as a nation, economically, or even with our border to the south, yeah, I think that Islamic terrorism is like a non-issue. I think there are way more if I had to make a top 10 of issues facing America, I don't even think terrorism would make the list.
I feel like that's a gross understatement of the problem we're facing with terrorism. I mean, you kind of have to understand it from a global scale. You're right. You can't just think of it, oh, this is our country here today. What is Bob from the store going to do? What is Bob from the farm going to do tomorrow? How Islam just does not affect his life. That's sort of just you're kind of really pigeonholing.
Okay, if you want, I just said that and I pulled the number to thin air, but we can actually try it if you want. Okay. Okay. So let's think of some issues. Okay, and we'll see if they're more important or less important than
sure
than Islamic terrorism.
This is slightly kind of a tangent, anyways.
It's not a tangent, though. Okay,
well,
how about our?
kind of what I wanted to pin down. I mean, we can get to this in a second, but what I wanted to pin down specifically was that the point you just made about how the texts are completely nothing to do with the religion, the progression of the religion into secular society, right?
Sure.
That's like basically what you're contending. Okay, the reason though that Christianity, and you're saying that you're citing basically the fact that Christians have been, hard to sort of conform to things like what gay rights, a lot of the social freedoms that we have today, right? Is that
okay.
what you'd be citing for that? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And so the thing is, though, that the reason, at least the major reason that these things have happened, and the major reason that Western societies are able to adapt with that, with Christianity intact as it is because the text of, you can sort of construe the text of the Bible you can interpret it in a way that's totally compatible with secular society.
And that's impossible to do with Islam?
It's not impossible. That's what I would say. That's what we need to work towards, but it's clearly a lot more difficult than with Christianity.
Okay, there is no possible way to interpret the Bible. As somebody that studied the Bible in high school and took 12 years of Catholic education, I am telling you that there is no possible way to interpret the Bible that makes something like contraception okay or makes something like premarital sex okay. But so many Christians do it anyway. You cannot interpret you are shunning.
But here's the difference. Here's the difference, though. Sure, again, by the way, I should really quickly state, I went to private Christian school for like 7 of my years of high school.
Then we should agree on most of these religious topics. You agree then that there is no possible way to interpret the scripture in order to make those things okay. Like
yes, but you're sort of cutting off the head of the point before it even. The thing is, though, man, is that there's the difference between like within the Quran. Basically, there are written like punishments for those things. In Christianity, in the Old Testament, you have that, but in the New Testament, with the Reformation especially, it's completely, so what you just said right there, premarital sex. There's nothing written in the Bible that says if you do premarital sex, given the New Testament, that you can justify actually, stoning someone or whatever the fuck, killing someone.
I mean, I get if your particular church doesn't put much stock at all in the Old Testament, then I guess. But I mean, it's not
a particular church. That's how the religion has progressed. So you're saying
sure, socially, but that's not by text. That's by culture.
Well, but it is by text.
But it's not.
The text, there's room within the text for that to be.
No, there's not. Jesus never gave a sermon saying that it's okay to have premarital sex. You will not find any New Testament book that advocates for contraception or the abuse of the gift of sex from God. You'll never find that.
I'll give you the most simple and actually effective answer, because you can literally apply this to anything. Again, and you're like, I'm totally with you that you can't, you can't take the Old Testament and the New Testament and be like, this all makes sense together. Obviously,
yes, you can. You absolutely can.
My point is this: there's just the simple love your neighbor as yourself. The simple, basically beatitudes, whatever, of the New Testament. You can take those and stretch those just out to infinity to interpret it in a positive way. So my point is, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it's not a contradiction of whatever.
You are giving me a
secular. I'm saying you can interpret it.
No, you can't, dude. You cannot do that. You are giving me your secular, non-theological interpretation, non-scholar interpretation of the Bible. This interpretation that you're giving me is something that somebody who would call themselves a non-denominationalist might give, where you pick and choose parts of the Bible that best suit you, and then you move forward. What you are saying can never, ever, ever.
Done as a society, essentially.
Yes, that's my argument. My argument is the reason why Christians have progressed is because they've disregarded so much of their religious text, not because they're interpreting it in new ways, but because they blatantly disregarded it.
But I'm not saying, okay, then we're kind of in agreement there. Hold on, let's pick that apart though, because I'm not saying that the way that they have interpreted the Old Testament or whatever the fuck is the reason that Christianity is now compatible. I'm saying that there's room. They're basically, yes, I'm saying that they've cherry picked modern day Christians in America, in the West, all over the West.
Okay, and this is what Jews and Muslims do in the West as well. I have a Jewish friend. We eat pork together. I know Muslim people in the United States that fucking eat pork and shit that's not halal or whatever the fuck. Like,
okay, but unfortunately, the reality is though that, like, number one, that Muslims in the West actually tend to have far more extreme views and kind of a lot more I don't know, like they give a lot more credence to their text and the harsh punishments it has in place than Christians or probably even Jews. I don't know about the Jew statistics on Jews, but if you look at the Pew Research polls, which I'm sure you've seen because you actually talked about it with Lauren Southern, you'd see the percentages of them in the West even that are okay with, or that want Sharia law, that are okay with.
Okay, so let's go over the original tweet where we're on here. You said that Muslims cause more problems in America than Christians do, and I'm telling you that Christians are far more devastating to the United States right now than Muslims have been, at least in my lifetime. Give me some of these massive issues facing the.
I said what I said specifically was that radical Islam is a bigger issue for the United States currently than Christianity.
Okay, and I disagree because I can point to like a dozen topics, or maybe not a dozen, but I can point to some very major topics the Christians are dramatically holding back the United States on. So I'm asking you to give me a few things that you think that Muslims severely impact the United States on. Muslims or extremist terrorism or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, well, first let me hear you just said you're going to show me some things that Christians are holding back on. I want to hear your assessment of those
Anything
things.
having to do with fucking is a massive fuck up from Christians that needs to stop. So teaching abstinence-only education. This is pure, unadulterated autism that needs to go the fuck away and should never exist and only exists because of religious people in the United States. Things like women's reproductive issues, like abortion, okay? These are things that Trump has even talked about getting judges to try to overturn. These are massive issues that we should have moved past, that we still have to deal with because of the Christian right in the United States.
Well,
these are Christian issues that are holding back the country. These are not party issues. These are not different groups. These are 100% ask-me religious people that are diehard Bible fans that think that contraception and abortion need to be illegal. Like,
okay. So
hold on. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. 1 second. What's up? Where's I'm getting in a second. Okay. I'll get in a little bit. All right. After I go to the bank. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
All right. So
those are just, and that's just one set of issues because there's more. I've got more when you're ready. But go ahead.
I mean, number one, I would point out just the disparity in population of both of these religions. I mean, how many people in the United States identify as Christian? How many people identify as
but that's not my problem. I don't have to prove any of that. You said that Muslims cause massive issues to the United States, and my claim was that Christians are the one that are holding back so much of the U.S. right now.
I didn't say Muslims. I said radical Islam.
Okay, whatever you want to call it. Radical Islam.
That's a big difference.
But it's not, because even radical Islam isn't causing my children to learn about fucking abstinence-only education in schools. Like,
first of all, you can't even necessarily. I mean, I would on the abortion thing specifically, like that if you're pro-life, quote unquote, that doesn't necessarily make you Christian, or that doesn't even necessarily mean you're buying into Christian values.
Okay, as somebody who is pro-life, okay, I am pro-life, okay. If you were to poll Americans, do you think that a minority of pro-lifers are Christian, or do you think that is a super majority?
Okay, but that's not a value that's necessarily.
It's absolutely important, because when you talk about people who are protesting outside fucking abortion clinics and shit, these are not atheists. These are not fucking Buddhists or whatever. These are Christians. When you think about like the Westboro,
how many Christians today are committing violent acts of terrorism?
I don't care about violent acts of terrorism. Violent acts of terrorism don't mean fuck all to the average human being. No, they don't. They don't mean fuck all, because it's true. Because if you stop using your feelings to decide what the world is like, and you look at raw fucking numbers, you would realize that like gun violence in the United States in 2015 alone has been responsible for like 10 times the amount of deaths as all of Islamic terrorism in the past 20 years in the United States, even if you include the World Trade Center bombings. So no, don't talk to me like this is such an obvious thing. No. This is such a fields-based argument, dude. Yes, it is, and that's just gun violence. That's not talking about automobile deaths. That's not talking about deaths caused by obesity. That's not talking about. There's a million other things that are more of a threat to. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. My bad.
Okay, it's fine. No, it's fine. Here's the thing, though. I know the kind of logic you're mistaking that I'm using but trust me, I'm not using that line of thinking. But surely, what I'm thinking, and really what anyone should be thinking, is the long-term thing, right? A dangerous ideology is a lot more. It doesn't matter whether a terrorist attack has done, has killed 5 people, and some other thing that can't be ascribed as any sort of ideology, any sort of really clandestine line of thinking. has killed more. I mean, so you comparing those two things isn't necessarily, that's not even the crux of what I'm saying.
I'm sorry. So what, are you saying that ISIS is going to develop a nation state in the United States and take over? Like, is that? Can you just tell me that now? Because that's what you. Then where is your argument for terrorism being a more of a threat than I said? If you still want to do it, we can go back and list 10 things that are more pressing to the United States.
I'm saying something that's destructive and ideologically based, and like terrorism is not a numbers game of millions of people slaughtered, at least when it comes to terror attacks in the West. That's not the aim. The aim is political, is obviously
it's political autism, like electing somebody like Trump because retards like you have been convinced that terrorism is a massive issue facing the West when it is a fucking non-issue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you retard.
No, it's fine.
Terrorism only becomes an issue when the people make it an issue. When people get scared, when people act like fucking retards and start protesting fucking Islam and start like creating organizations like the TSA and Homeland Security and start spending billions and billions of dollars on this political security theater, right? That's when terrorism becomes an issue, when you make it an issue, right? And it's funny because people on the right are always the ones saying, well, the only person who can decide how you feel is yourself. So if someone calls you a nigger, don't be sad about it. Just get over it. But when it comes to terrorism, like, oh no, well fuck, we gotta spend 50 trillion fucking dollars securing every single fucking bathroom against an ISIS toilet bomber. Like, come on, dude. Terrorism is only as big of an issue as you make it out to be. And if you look at the numbers, that's what I like to look at because I'm a reals over feels kind of guy. If you look at the numbers, terrorism is nowhere near a threat to the United States or even fucking Europe compared to a number of other issues. There are so many other issues that are so much more important than terrorism.
Okay. To that point, first of all, let me clarify a couple things really quick. I'm not against Islam. I'm not against Muslims. I'm not. Maybe you weren't even describing me.
Okay,
but
sure. But this is going back to the point. The reason why you were here is because you tweeted that you thought that Islamic extremism was more of a threat today to the progress of the United States than Christians, which is something that I still disagree with. Do you agree that on the contraceptive issue and on the abortion issue that these are things that Christians fundamentally hold the United States back on, or do you disagree with that?
I don't think. Okay. Well, in terms of the contraception thing, that one is something that you can definitely tie into Christianity, without a doubt.
Okay. So we agree that Christians hold us back on teaching contraceptive use to teenagers because they're in favor of abstinence-only education.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But
what about
on the fact of abortion?
Okay.
You can't necessarily. That's just a morals thing. I mean, that's not a matter of.
Okay.
If you
so you think that if I were to look up stats right now on religious opposition to abortion, you think that a lot of people that oppose abortion are going to be secular, atheists, or whatever? It's not going to be a large.
Of course, there's going to be a lot of Christians, but my point, dude, is that that's an issue that's it's first and foremost a moral issue. It's not like an issue that's
okay. And if your morals are informed by your religion, what?
Sure, okay, but everyone thinks it's wrong to fucking we have established morals within society without religion, without the need for religion. So
religious people, Christians don't think so. This is a Christian nation.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure they don't think so. But my point is, you could have a moral backing for being pro-life without being Christian, and therefore that's not a strictly Christian issue. Just because a lot of Christians happen to be identifying with it doesn't make it.
If every single Christian in the United States was transformed into somebody secular or atheist or whatever, do you think that we would still be arguing about the legality of abortion?
Probably not. No. But again, But again, you're trying to match two. Those are two.
Okay, let me try this. Here's my claim: the majority of abortion opposition in the United States right now comes from religious people. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree with that. Yes.
Okay, then that's my point. Religious people are holding America back on this issue.
But that's not okay. That first of all, I would say. Here's what you're missing, man. You just said you're pro-life, right?
Yes.
Okay, being pro-life is not necessarily a strictly religious thing, and so therefore, whether the majority of people or not, or that do it are religious or not, does not mean that that's holding us back because they're religious. So
you just said that
hold on. There is a legitimate argument to make for being pro-life without the need for religion. So therefore. You're saying holding us that we're being held back.
There's a legitimate argument for abstinence-only education if you're not religious. It's not illegitimate, but you can make one if you want to. This is my problem. You agreed with the two premises that I need to prove my argument. You agreed that the majority of opposition to abortion right now comes from religious people in the United States, Christians in particular, and you agreed that if all of these Christians were to magically become secular, they probably wouldn't oppose abortion. You agreed with both of those.
You just said we're being held back basically because people are pro-life.
Sure, yes, we are, yes.
Okay, so then you're well then you're pro. Are you holding the country back yourself as well? I don't understand.
No, pragmatically, I am okay with abortion. I think you should probably have access to it because even if you make it illegal, people end up getting it illegally. Everything ends up getting super messed up. And in terms of like, hold on one second. What's up? What? Can I tell you about Slender Man? Wait, hold on one second. Can I what? Sound out Slender Man? Here, I'll type. This is the first part of the word for you. Right? You can figure out the last part, right? Slender. Alright. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So I mean, the way that I view that radical Islam is a bigger issue to the U.S. is because I'm thinking long term. I'm thinking big picture. Whether that there's been, you know, statistically by the numbers, yeah, again, more people have been killed by obesity than by fucking any religion, by any extremist religion in the past fucking 50 years, whatever, I'm sure. But my point is that when it's an ideological based thing, when it's and that's based on Islam in this case, that has huge reaching implications. And so to just write that off as
but you're acting like this isn't an ideologically based thing. Christianity is ideologically based too. What?
Okay, but is the ideology of Christianity going out and fucking doing again? That's not even a comparable thing to what Islam
this is
right
the
now.
problem. It's not comparable. You're right because Christians do so much more damage to the United States than Muslims do. It's not even comparable. Muslims don't influence my legislation. Muslims don't vote for the fucking president. Muslims don't have like far-reaching implications on how we deal education. And then we're still only on the abortion thing. There's still tons of other issues that Christians fuck the U.S. on.
If you're thinking big picture,
okay,
then you realize that number one, that it could have more of an influence. I'm talking about radical Islamic, terrorism or whatever. Just the influence of radical Islam could have more of an influence down the line if that ideology continues. Number one, and number two, I mean, I feel like you're very much minimalizing this issue, and I don't think it's. Again, I agree when you talked about the airport stuff and all that stuff. In a way, I agree with you. But here's the thing: I think a lot of this money being poured into this, a lot of this bullshit going on, in a sense, I think we both agree because I agree that we're kind of overblowing it, but it's being overblown in the sense that it would be far less complicated if we could just identify the actual fucking issues instead of tiptoeing around the issues and being all politically correct and trying to, appease the sentiments of everyone. With the denial of facts. I mean, if you look at Europe, that's exactly what's going on over there. There was, in Germany, in all these countries, I mean, they're so blindsided to the clear issues stemming from this immigration, the clear issues of radical Islam.
Firstly, we're talking about the United States. Secondly, you're moving in a far different direction. Even if Islam does have problems, which I'm sure it does, every religion does, the central point was whether or not Christianity or Islam causes more harm to the United States. I've given you two major policy issues, and we can go on to more major policy issues where Christians
I want to hear more anyways. Go ahead.
On education, Christians tend to be very autistic. They tend to be very, very big on homeschooling and very, very big on getting government out of education as much as possible and keeping the government out of the schools so that they can teach really autistic shit like creationism and stupid shit like that in schools. That's a Christian issue. When you talk about people that are massively in favor...
What power does that movement have, by the way? Every single public school teaches evolution. Last I checked...
They do now, but I mean, you had the Vice President of the United States a few years ago giving a speech in front of Congress to keep creationism taught in schools. It's gotten better now, but this is something that we have had to fight. We've had to drag Christians kicking and screaming into the new age where we do not teach things like creationism in schools anymore. These are Christian issues, right?
Yeah, well, creationism is obviously a Christian thing, yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, that's. But again, like you just admitted, I mean, that's clearly a non-issue.
It's not a non-issue. It's still things that we fight about. One of Trump's big memes about getting rid of Common Core and leaving education up to the states and removing federal guidelines. If you're someplace in the autismal fucking deep fucking South, if you live in some rural bumfuck nowhere white trash community, what the fuck do you think these guys are going to teach kids going to school? Do you think that they're going to be teaching them about scientific rigor and all that shit? No, a lot of it is going to end up getting mixed in with stupid fucking religious education in public schools. When you talk about decentralizing education and leaving it up to the states or the cities, what do you think a lot of these places are going to turn to? Like, This is the kind of stuff that you're heading towards, and Trump is a big person on this, on getting rid of all the federal guidelines for education. Like, this is a Christian issue. This is a Christian problem in the United States, right?
Well, that's also the decentralization of education is also a very libertarian value. That's a very
Sure, it can be, but a lot of the people that are protesting for it, and you can find this on any Christian rights platform, a lot of people that fight for it, sure, here's a link in chat, creationists attacking Texas Education Board for trying to eliminate junk science in school. Like, these are news stories that pop up all the time where you've got this brave fucking teacher standing against the system who will still teach his kids that the earth is 6,000 years old or some shit. These are Christian issues, right?
Yeah, those are Christian, yes. Okay, so you view that.
What about gay rights? Okay. What about making it so gay people can get married?
Again, another
Christian
case of,
issue.
That is made. Again, that's just a perfect example, actually, of how something else that's been completely secularized and made compatible with religion. I mean, obviously,
but who do you think we had to fight with so much? And Trump has talked about rolling back gay rights. Who do you think is in favor of rolling back gay rights and leaving it up to the states and making it so you could discriminate on people and not have to bake cakes or whatever for them if they're gay and discriminating on people based on their sexuality, right? Who do you think pushes for this? These are religious issues. These are religious people that push back on these on the basis of theology.
You think the pushback on gay rights and all these fringe as fuck pushbacks on gay rights?
Wait, fringe? You think gay rights are fringe? Destiny, you think abstinence-only education is fringe?
Destiny, do you really honestly believe we're going to decentralize education as an issue?
I don't. If Trump gets his way, I didn't think we were going to abolish the ACA, but it might happen. I don't know, dude. Damn. Why even part of the ACA? A lot of the reasons why Christians take issue with that is because they have to pay for fucking birth control. And that's something you can look up. That is a religious issue. Are you asking me if I think it's going to happen? What?
You seem to be citing these, like, half the things you cited are things that we've already basically overcome, and that you're in the fear that we're going to basically roll back on.
We are in the process of overcoming them, but gay rights are still an issue in the United States. When you get a president that talks about getting rid of the gay marriage mandate or whatever, making it so that it's not illegal for your state to ban gay marriage, or not illegal for your state to ban abortion. Trump has been on record saying people can go to another state to get an abortion if they need to, right? These are things that, yes, the Christian right wants to roll back on. Yes.
I don't see that happening.
That's great if you don't see it, but that's been. Do you acknowledge that was part of Trump's platform?
I've heard him mention things like that.
Okay, so the president of the United States was voted.
Okay,
so that was just to appeal to people, and that wasn't an important thing. Okay, but you just said it, to appeal to his voter base. So you admit that there are a lot of religious people that are pushing for these ass backwards issues.
But they're not. I don't think that'll ever happen. I just think that's a fairy tale of that's just absurd to me. We would go back on those things.
I think it's absurd that we would roll back on the ACA, but Republicans want to do it. What do you mean?
But okay. So then, you said you don't even view Islam as a threat, period.
Maybe to some very minor ways, but no, I think there are I said if we were to make a list, we could probably find 10 issues facing America that are far more relevant than fucking.
Okay, so is that all the ones you have?
What?
Contraception, abortion, which, whatever. Okay, abortion.
Whatever.
And
whatever. Reproductive rights.
Things?
Whatever. I don't know. Gay rights, education is a pretty big one. The abstinence-only bullshit, the junk science in schools. I don't know how the fuck religion ties into it, but a lot of religious people seem to have problems with fucking climate change too. Although I don't know if I'm starting to mix in Republican politics with Christian politics. I don't know if there's some theological thing there.
What you're doing with this whole thing is.
Okay.
I feel like you're conflating. Well, not conflating. I mean, they are very much.
This is my issue. Here's my issue right now. If somebody shows up in a club and they barely fucking whisper the word ISIS, like alt-right people are so crazy, like, oh, Islamic fucking State niggers bombing all of our shit again. Oh, like it's Islam, right? And Bush and Cheney, these people literally say things like, I talked to Jesus and he told me going to war with Iraq was the right thing. And you're like, whoa, no religion there. No, that's just a small part of it. These are politics. This has nothing to do with Christianity. Just the fact that George Bush mentioned praying to God and talking to God. No. You have to understand that I don't want to like do this fedora to me, but to an atheist, that shit sounds fucking retarded. You consult with an invisible fucking man that doesn't exist for major issues on foreign policy, like sending people to war to die. That shit is fucking crazy. But you're so quick to write it off as like, well, no, those aren't religious issues. That's just politics. That's just that. That's just that. But then when you point to a country where you have an entire group of people that are oppressed for a long time and get picked up by an extremist group, oh, ISIS, that's 100%. That's 100% Islam. All of that is 100% religion. Oh no, that is definitely a problem with Islam. Like, what the fuck? Why are you so nice to Christians?
Let me ask you this. Wait, I'm not here to. The last thing I want to do is defend George Bush. But do you?
Okay, no, I'm not trying to have you defend George Bush. I'm just saying that like that hurts me in the spirit.
Sure, but let me ask you: do you actually think that he truly believes that God talked to him and that's why he fucking...
I have no fucking idea because I'm not a fucking lunatic. When I get up and I talk to people, I never reference myself speaking to an invisible man. So I don't know. I don't know how crazy that motherfucker is. It's impossible for me to tell how insane any individual religious person is. That you can get 40, 50, 60 years through your life and still think there's an invisible fucking boogeyman looking over everything you do. I don't know how crazy someone like that is. It's hard for me to determine.
Sure, but I think that you can also there's definitely a spectrum, and
there might be
just to say, oh, any person who's religious is equally fucking crazy. That's absurd. Like
it might. I don't know. I don't know, dude. It's hard for me to say. If you're talking to the country about going to war with another nation and you talk about how you fucking prayed for guidance, I don't know what the fuck this person is thinking.
Okay.
But I'm saying, I don't think that this is my problem with you, is that if some rabbi, or not a rabbi, whatever the fuck they call him, imam, or imam, or whatever the fuck they call him, the Muslim guy was to get up and say, we are going to war because fucking Muhammad fucking told us in the hadith or whatever, right? Then you guys would be like, 100% religion, 100% Islam, 100%. Right. And it's like, damn, dude, well, so like these people have no politics or anything? It's all religion when it's them, but when it's people in the West, it's not. That's not the fault of Christianity at all. No. These are political things. Like it seems like a double standard.
I wouldn't say it's all religion, but it's undeniable that religion certainly plays far more of a role in the political decisions and the movings and goings of certain countries, certain cultures.
You say that, dude. If somebody were running, you say that, and Trump in one of his rallies literally got up and held up the fucking Bible and said, "This is the most important book in the world." I don't know, dude. I don't know.
The fucking Republican voters of his, man.
Dude.
Do you really think Trump gives a shit about the Bible? Honestly,
I don't know, dude. On, man. But when Muslims do it, it's 100% religion and 100% they believe it and 100% they all.
No. Like, don't be so black and white on this.
It's not black, but it's not. It's the problem is how much credence you give to the people that you agree with and how little leeway you give to the people you disagree with. I'm telling you, as an atheist, nothing like drives me crazier than seeing people like talk about Bibles and talk about God and talk about religion and Jesus and God and Jesus, Jesus crosses and everywhere. And then, whoa, dude, it's not religion. That's just politics. He's just trying to appeal to people. If a Muslim was doing that shit in the United States, you'd be going fucking crazy. You would be going crazy.
Identity politics into this, okay?
Because we're talking about identity politics. We're talking about Muslims and Christians. Why are we not talking about identity? What do you mean? Can you imagine if a group of Muslims? Can you imagine if a group of Muslims in the United States would have taken over a piece of federal land and tried to declare themselves like their own fucking state, like that crazy group of fucking redneck white trash Christians did? People would be going fucking crazy. We would have been fucking nuking that part of Utah or wherever the fuck that happened. Like,
okay, I think you're constantly inserting these common like phrases and issues you take in with conservatives and shit, and inserting them into the conversation when I've made none of these claims. Okay, so I feel like that's just like, I don't know, that's like non sequitur. I don't know why you keep doing that. You just keep inserting these things, and I understand you're trying to fight the greater argument, but that's not necessarily what I'm saying. Like, there as with anything, there's no fucking black and white to it. Okay, like with religion's influence on Islamic nations and just that how that whole thing works out, there is certainly some political involvement there. 100%. I think you would be foolish to deny that, to say it's fucking 100% religious. I'm not saying that. I don't think most rational thinking people are saying that, unless you're talking like fucking Joe Schmo from Texas or whatever. I don't know.
I'm going by the prevailing thought in the United States right now. That's what I'm going on.
But you're also comparing the influence of religion in fucking what I don't even know, like Pakistan or some shit, whatever. Just extremist.
No, we were talking about religious influence in the United States. Yes, the reason why you are here is arguing on what had a worse impact in the U.S., right. Islamic terrorism or Christians. Okay. And I just gave you 3 or 4 different big issues that Christians are holding the United States back on.
Okay.
And you've given me Islamic terrorism.
You just made a point that I'm right now responding to. You just made a point saying that the people who say that this is all religion are fucking crazy. They're stupid because they're giving no credence to their enemies and giving all the ones to their allies, whatever it's convenient for them. That's basically what you're saying. That you can't. Okay, so on that point though, there are very legitimate reasons and very verifiable things that you can look into. That clearly religion is a huge factor a varying a factor that's much more major in other places than here in terms of, especially when you talk about Christianity versus Islam, the influence of both of those on the respective countries and regions is way different. I mean, Christianity's influence on Western cultures, Western countries, is not even comparable to Islamic ones on the
Sure, but when I'm talking about Islam in Eastern countries, we were talking about the United States of America.
I just responded to that. Speaking of, okay, now on your point of Islam in the United States of America, yes, I agree. Obviously, we don't have a huge we don't have ISIS in the U.S. We don't have a fucking territory conquered by radical Islamic groups. That's not the point I'm making. But as an overall picture, the threat of radical Islam is much bigger than radical Christianity. And,
what is the threat of radical Islam? What is this threat? This looming threat?
Of radical Islam is, I'm just referring to basically just radicalization of people, militant groups, whatever. I mean,
radical Islam has existed for fucking hundreds of years, and it hasn't caused any massive problems yet. So what is this looming threat of radical Islam?
It hasn't caused any massive problems yet. I mean, have you turned on the news lately?
What radical problems are we running into in the United States because of radical Islam?
You caveat that with the United States, right? Well, the United States is a part of the global community.
So the answer was none. Is that correct? Because you just tried to broaden it. When I ask you what issues are the United States facing.
So here's the problem, Destiny. You're viewing this through the lens of Joe Schmo's everyday fucking life.
Or even through the lens of the United States as a country.
Right, and I just pointed out how that's an issue of the United States as a country, as a political issue. If you're talking about education issue. If you want to talk about education issue, obviously Islam has far less of an influence.
Okay, what issues does Islam influence? Is Islam causing the global climate to warm? Is Islam hurting our energy policy? Is Islam hurting our economy? Is Islam hurting our job market? Is Islam depressing our wages?
Okay, is Christianity depressing our wages? Is it Christianity doing any of those things? Obviously not.
Christianity is hurting our education. It's hurting women's access to reproductive things, which can in turn hurt the welfare state. It hurts the ability to teach people about contraception, which could be a major indicator if you have a child out of wedlock, which is also a major drain on the welfare state. So yeah, in some ways, Christians do very adversely affect those policies, yes. So which ways are Islam hurting the United States?
Well, Islam is hurting the United States again. So you're trying to reframe the scope of it.
That was the original question. How is Islam hurting the United States more than Christians?
Let me answer. Okay, let me answer. The U.S. as the part of the global community, it very much faces the issues that are associated with radical Islamic terrorism. 100%. To deny that is just foolish.
Okay, what are the issues of radical Islamic terrorism?
What are the issues of Islamic terrorism? Number one, I would just say where do I start? The recruitment of people into militant groups, the conflicts going on in so many different war-torn countries right now, like Somalia, Syria, just the destabilized political structures of all those countries. And
let's go through here. How about this? Let's try to name 10 things. I'm going to borrow chat here too and see if we can help. Okay, let's talk about 10 different issues. What do you think is more important? What do you think is a more pressing issue to the United States right now? A reformation of our immigration policy or Islamic terrorism?
Again, when you frame it, yes, I would say that.
Okay, so that's one issue that's more important than Islamic terrorism. Okay, what do you think is a more pressing issue to the United States? The massive prevalence in obesity or Islamic terrorism?
This is such a non sequitur, man.
It's not because I told you that I can give you 10. There are so many more pressing issues to the United States. What about the reformation of our healthcare system or Islamic terrorism? What about the threat of climate change or Islamic terrorism? What about our energy policy or Islamic terrorism? What about illegal immigration to the South or Islamic terrorism? Right? I can give you dozens of issues that are more important to the United States than fucking Islamic terrorism. Things that are so much more important.
Okay, Destiny, let me ask you this then. With that same list, name me 10 things that are more pressing in the United States than radical Christians, period.
I could name things in general as there as well.
Yeah,
but that wasn't
exactly.
what. But we weren't asking, do Christians pose more of a threat than any other thing? I said that Christians pose more of a threat than Islamic people, not than every other issue, but they pose more of a threat than Islamic people.
Right, and I didn't say, and I wasn't saying, okay, but you just compared non-Christian issues to Islamic things.
Because you are saying that I am dramatically underrating the threat of Islamic terrorism. And what I'm saying is that Islamic terrorism is not that big of a threat to the United States, and you're trying to make it sound like it is a massive threat. So I'm asking, okay, pretty big. What does pretty big mean? Then where would it go on your top 10 list? Like, I'm telling you that I can name you dozens of issues that are more important than Islamic terrorism, and you're telling me it's a really big threat. Well, how big is a really big threat to you? Does it make the top 50? Does it make the top 3? Is it the most important? Like, what?
It depends on how you frame what the proper comparison. So obesity in the U.S. is obviously, it affects more people's lives. But is it something that I should be more concerned? Like, again, the basis of it being a global of radical Islam being a global ideology makes it a completely different issue, a very different issue than obesity in the United States. You understand that, right? So,
but it's not. It's only a different issue because you want it to be a different issue. When you have millions of people dying of like heart disease and shit like these, avoidable deaths that are a massive strain on our economy, a strain on our healthcare system, which is central to this election, getting rid of the ACA and bringing all these costs under control. These are all things that are pressing, vitally important issues. And you're trying to say that like, well, it's not that big of a deal because, a few people die, when terrorist attacks happen. So that's a massive ideology. Like, the fuck, dude? Health issues are huge.
Destiny, let me ask you something. And I promise this will tie back. Do you think mental illness is a problem in the U.S. right now?
The way that we treat it, yeah, sure.
Okay. You think it's probably a pretty major issue, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Strictly going by the numbers, if I'm not mistaken, the actual amount of deaths from, school shootings or, mass shootings, which is very heavily linked to mental illness and all that, is like, it wouldn't even be a blip on the radar when you compare it to all these other issues. So you can't just compare it number by number strictly in that way, which I feel
you didn't ask me to compare it number by number. You asked me if something was a big issue. Yeah, sure it is. I don't know how big of an issue is it. Is it a bigger issue than something else? So what does that have to do with anything?
Right. So you could say mental illness is completely a non-issue because only fucking 50 people died this year from mass shootings related to mental illness. Clearly it's not that big of an issue. Obesity killed fucking 2 million, right? So clearly obesity is a much bigger issue.
It sounds like a much bigger issue. Sure, if those numbers are correct, then yeah, of course.
Right. But the way you approach those issues is not
mental illness manifests itself in other ways as well, though, too, doesn't it? I'm pretty sure. I'm positive that mental illness is also dramatically overrepresented in homeless community as well.
Absolutely right. In that same way, something that's like an extremist ideology manifests itself in many different ways, and it's not. You can't.
Okay, what other ways does Islamic radical terrorism manifest itself in the United States? Name one other way besides terrorist attacks. Do we have states in the United States that are coming under Sharia law? Yes or no?
No, of course.
Do we have Muslims en masse that are protesting against our fucking education or trying to cause political change?
We don't.
Okay, so what other ways does Islamic terrorism manifest itself in the United States the way that mental illness does?
I could point to the threat of not the threat. I keep saying threat. Maybe I'm overusing that word and making this more hostile than it needs to be. Number one, something that's concerning is certainly the beliefs commonly held by even moderate Muslims.
No, I don't give a fuck about the beliefs. I want to see actions. No, I want to see actions. What are some things that Muslims are doing that the way that this Islamic terrorism is manifesting itself in society, like the way that mental illness manifests itself in society?
That's just such a broad-reaching question.
So it should be really easy to point out one thing if it's so broad. Because I gave you one for mental illness. Mental illness can manifest itself in a lot of ways. Mental illness can manifest itself in actual GDP loss because of loss of worker productivity. It can manifest itself in different types of crime, school shootings, domestic abuse, partner abuse, stuff like that. It can manifest itself into burdens on the welfare system because people that are mentally unstable might be more likely to give their children up for adoption, which would be a drag on the system. It could also manifest itself in the criminal system because maybe children with parents with mental disease are more likely to wind up in prisons, which costs funding for, right? I can get there. That's just right off the top of my head. There's 4 ways. So tell me one way, and I'm just asking for one way. Then this is one of the most important issues you say. How can Islamic terrorism manifest itself negatively in American society? Just one way.
Okay, I'm not. Let me clarify here. radical Islam as an issue, as a global issue, is more important to the U.S. than Christianity as an issue or whatever. In other words, there's far more destructive things coming out of radical Islam.
Can you name me one? Just name a thing. Name destructive thing in the United States.
One destructive. Okay, you could point to multiple terrorist attacks. You can point to multiple radicalization, centers or whatever.
Okay, hold on. So we have terrorist attacks. Do you want to include 9/11 or not? Even if you do, it doesn't really help much. How many deaths is that on average over the past 20 years?
Yeah, dude, you're going by numbers strictly, which is like such a.
I know. I understand. No, it's not good to go by numbers because I'm not playing into your feels. I understand that, dude.
No.
I understand that it's my fault.
I'm not a very feely type of person either.
No, I understand. Then how do you say something and then take yourself seriously when you say like, dude, you're just going into the numbers, man. What more is it besides the numbers? What else is there?
Because in the same way. What else is there besides numbers? So you don't think there's any actual problems of radical Islamic terrorism other than just the number of people killed? Is that what you're telling me?
No, there are other problems as well. But talk to me about them. What other problems?
Okay, there are other problems associated with it as well.
Yeah, but they can all be measured. Huh? Not the intangible problems of, well, I was walking down the street one day and I saw a woman wearing a fucking burqa. Holy fuck. Like, give me, like, what other ways? Usually you can measure these ways. You talk about radicalized communities. Are there communities living under Sharia law in the United States? Is this a widespread problem?
No, but in that same way, mental illness is a very hard to quantify issue. And so that's a perfect analogy, I feel like, in a way. Because going strictly based on the numbers, it's very hard to quantify. It's
but I just gave you 3 or 4 different things. Differences in education, homeschooling versus actual public schools, or making them local or whatever. These are religious issues. Abortion, this is a religious issue. Contraception, this is a religious issue. Gay rights, this is a religious issue. Even fucking immigration and some shit can tie back to religious issues. Like, I don't see Islam manifesting itself in the United States in ways that are dragging policy behind. Right. I've never heard somebody imply all of these people asking for $15 an hour minimum wage. This is coming from the fucking Quran. Like, I've never heard that this is manifesting in these ways.
Right. That I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying that Islam is affecting our fucking, policy making.
So it's no real effect compared to Christians. This is my central argument, that Christians are having a detrimental impact on the United States in a far more widespread reaching way due to policy enactment than fucking Muslims are. That was my whole argument.
But to say that, I don't know, like the way you're framing it is not a way that I would agree with. I mean, I think framing all that stuff as being strictly, number one, being strictly Christian is not always the case. I agree with a lot of it is definitely Christian charged.
Okay, I'll try to find non-Christians that argue against contraceptive use.
No, let me even take you at that point though, because it's for me it's a bigger thing than that though. Is just I'm talking about as something that's more concerning. Something that's a more of a issue. I guess the way we're quantifying issue is that we're doing different definitions of it. You're quantifying it by strictly the policy making effects.
I'm qualifying issues by things that are real issues that can be measured statistically and have a real impact on the average American's life. Not on what I see on the TV screen about how scary sand niggers are across the fucking ocean. Like actual real issues. Things like unemployment. Things like average median wages. Things like immigration policy. Things like education, right? Yeah, things affecting climate change. Real issues. Not like I saw this on the fucking Breitbart and brown people are really scary. And you haven't given me not a single real issue. I asked you for one way that Islamic terrorism or Islamic ideology manifests itself and hurts America. And on all of this, you still haven't given me a single thing that it does. And I gave you like fucking 10. Like, other than you're saying that it's a real because ideology and scary
if you want to go down the route of saying that if you want to connect all of those things and say that Christianity is responsible for all those things, I mean, I feel like it's almost like reframing saying conservatives are the issue because also conservatives hold all those things.
Sure, a lot of the majority of religious people are conservative. Yes, that is a serious problem, and that is a serious problem with the conservative platform. Yes.
Right. Okay. So I guess my point is that I just think in terms of a bigger picture. In terms of a global thing, Islam is a much bigger of an issue. So
okay, do you think globally Islam is more?
I agree with you that everyday life, radical Islamic terrorism does not affect 99% of fucking U.S. people's everyday lives. But that does not mean it should not be concerning. That does not mean it's not an issue just because it doesn't affect you or your life or mine.
If you could measure everything as a terrorist attack over the past 50 years, what do you think had the most dramatic impact on most people's lives? My argument would probably be the 2007-2008 housing collapse in the United States. Probably had one of the biggest economic ripples and affected lives all over the world. That had nothing to do with Islamic terrorism.
I mean, yeah, of course, like an economic downturn is of course going to be a huge fucking issue. I mean, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that whether something is a bigger issue or not doesn't deny the severity of another issue.
Okay, but when you talk about issues, scope and scale is usually really important. If I were to get on a stage and talk about how one of the most important issues facing the United States, not the most important, but one of the most important issues is legalizing poker online, you would look at me like a crazy person. Like, okay, I mean, that's kind of an issue, sure, but...
Right.
In much the same way that when someone gets on stage, says my favorite book and the whole most important book ever is the Bible, and also, by the way, another way that religion manifests itself. Why are we so fiercely allegiant to Israel? Because that's a religious issue as well. Like, when somebody gets on stage and says the Bible is the most important book and Islamic terrorism is one of the most important things facing the nation, I can't help but balk a little bit because that just doesn't seem to be true at all.
I mean, again, it's for me the way I'm looking at it. Almost all of our foreign efforts, in terms of like military and all that, is completely focused on that as an issue.
But it's not. No, that's what they want you to think, okay? That's what they want you to think. That's what the fucking political elite or whatever. Those guys don't give a fuck about. You think Obama and Hillary gave a fuck about fucking Islam? They're more concerned with diddling with fucking Putin and getting strategically valuable territory over in the Middle East than they could ever give a fuck about fucking Islam. They don't care about any of that shit. Do you think we went to Iraq because we were scared of fucking Islam? No, these are all strategical military interests that are related to NATO and its mission against Russia than anything having to do with fucking Islam.
Okay, and you might be right on that. I'm not even necessarily denying that, but in the same way that you just disconnected those two things, I could just as easily say whatever. The things you're talking about with those policies and all that being
but made, that's not true.
You think these politicians actually give a fuck about the Bible? I mean, clearly they're just whatever.
But they're talking to their constituency and they're doing things to enact things to please the religious right in the United States. If we really hated Muslims, but we're not. No, we're not. We're not doing anything around the world really to deal with radical Islamists. Because if that was true, then one of our biggest allies in the Middle East wouldn't be fucking Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and Jordan. All of these people that are constantly funneling money over to people in fucking ISIS. We are allies with these people. Why? Do you think because people love these people? Like, these are people that we make fun of. What?
Right. I am totally in agreement with you that our fucking political system and the way we're conducting our foreign policy is completely backwards, completely fucked up, and is really just missing the point of the thing. And that's kind of what I'm saying with this whole thing is that we're really not getting to the crux of the problem.
But the problem is, even though we say we hate Islamic terrorism or whatever, we're not going overseas and constantly doing shit to deal with it.
I agree.
But we are enacting policy locally and having discussions about enacting local policy, like abolishing the Department of Education, like holding back gay rights and making so the Supreme fucking Court has to step in to tell people that they can't trample on civil rights, and holding back the ability to teach people about contraceptive use in high school. These are things that are religious issues that are manifested in real ways in our society today that religious people are fucking us on.
Right, and I'm coming at this from the perspective of a global perspective, and the U.S.'s political interests. I believe whether we're doing it or not, that's my point, though, is that we should be the efforts we have. I agree, like our fucking partnership with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar, with all these fucking underhanded deals that we do with them is complete evidence of the fact that we're really fucking missing the point with where the core of the issue is, right? And so, yeah, that's my point, is that we're really missing the issue here of, and again, I think this is a very leftist thing that has kind of steered us in this direction of, number one, possibly one factor is just political correctness in general. But number two is
any of this have to do with political correctness?
Political correctness of, like terms like Islamophobe, terms like, whatever, just kind of vilifying that dares.
What if we take this back? Can you agree with me that Christianity is a bigger problem in the United States than Islam, based on the issues that we've talked about, or do you still think Islam is a bigger issue?
The way that you frame it, yes. The way that I frame it, I think it's a little bit different. I'm not trying to do like an intersubjective reality meme here, but like I really do think that the fucking frame of reference is important here.
And that frame of reference being that sometimes there are terrorist attacks, so it is more important to the United States.
No, not just sometimes there are terrorist attacks. That there's actual fucking huge conflicts, civil wars erupting in countries, some of which we
don't have any military presence in. We're not sending people to Syria. I guess you could argue
those are very big issues on the board right now, as you know. With this presidency, that might happen, and that was on board with Obama. Like, those are very possible things we've been involved in, obviously,
Destiny,
very recently. So to completely separate that from the United
overheat.
States is a little bit
Bonus
silly,
meme.
I think.
Over Russell.
Now, I completely agree with you that our fucking foreign policy right now is fucked up, that our politicians, the way we're handling this shit, is fucked up. I agree with you. So I feel like you're conflating what I'm saying with me being a typical Republican conservative, which I'm not at all. I just feel like it's completely anti-productive to not identify the issue of Islam, to compare. Really, what I take issue with is just to the point is when people compare Christianity and radical Christianity and say things like, "Oh, the Crusades, remember those?" And like,
I don't care. Have we talked anything at all about the Crusades in this conversation?
I'm not saying.
Okay, so I've given you very real ways that Christians are hurting the United States today. I don't care about what happened 200 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever.
Okay, sure. And I'm giving you real ways in which radical Islam is a very real
But you
issue.
haven't. You've just said the ideology and the threat are spooky and civil wars.
Okay, no, yes, civil wars and huge conflicts going on in Somalia, in Syria. You don't think those are religiously charged at all?
I don't know anything about what's going on in Somalia, but I know that Syria has a lot more to do with religion. It's mostly political, people oppressing people, different revolutions.
I mean, you surely know of the Islamic militant groups, you know, Hamas and
these people that are able to exist in these massively destabilized areas. Really makes you think.
Sure. And so this comes back to the chicken before the egg thing. Like, do you think those massively stabilized areas are just all political, or is it maybe some religion influence, some religious turmoil between, I don't know, the Shia and the Sunni? That's only been a conflict.
Shia
and
Sunni in some areas lived together for a long time without problems before the United States
areas
stepped in, and fucking, I don't know, dude. You can point to things like the Iranian Revolution. You can point to things like the destabilization of Syria. You can point to the appointment of the Maliki guy in fucking Iraq. I don't know, dude. It's hard to separate the politics from the religion when the West is constantly fucking installing dictators and constantly dethroning dictators. So I mean, I don't know. Like, you're asking me, like, well, don't you think the religion has a lot to do with it? I don't know. How much does the religion have to do with us fucking over the Iran? Like, I don't know, dude. Like, fuck. I don't think it had much to do with it at all. Like,
I'm not advocating that our interests necessarily have been for for just reasons. I mean, I agree. Politically, we fucked things up a lot in the Middle East, 100%. And I'm the biggest critic of that. Okay, trust me. But I'm just saying that there's clearly something in the, I mean, fucking, it's not a coincidence that Muhammad was basically a warlord and a conqueror.
What about the Old Testament? That shit is violent as fuck. But Jews aren't on the fucking rampage, and Christians, for the most part, have neglected the Old Testament in favor of the New. Like,
sure, if you want to compare the texts, though, then you would find that the argument is heavily not in your favor.
Yeah, too bad nobody does the religion by the texts except for extremist fundamentalists.
But the reason that those extremist fundamentalists are able to become the mainstream in a lot of ways, or at least
the extremist fundamentalists in Islam are not the mainstream.
Well,
otherwise, we would be seeing millions of terrorist attacks instead of a handful.
In certain areas, they are obviously in the.
Okay, and if I go to the city where the Westboro Baptist Church lives, or the KKK lives, or neo-Nazis live, I could also probably find a large concentration of religious extremism. Right now, the bigger problem is obviously Islam, because they're far more wide-reaching, and there's fucking more of them in the Middle East than there are extremists in the West.
That's exactly my point.
What is so the whole point of your argument this time has been that Islamic terrorism exists?
No, that radical Islam is much bigger of a threat than radical Christianity. I mean,
I'm talking to the West, to the United States. If you're talking about in pure broad, we were talking threats in regards to terrorist attacks. Islam, of course, I think Islam is probably right now more of a threat in terms of committing terrorist attacks than Christianity. But terrorist attacks on my list of issues that face America is very, very, very far down that list. It's like maybe makes the top 20.
Okay, fine. That's fair. That's fair enough. That's your list. But yeah, I mean, okay. Obviously, terrorist attacks are far and away much more a product of radical Islam. But Yeah, I mean, the point I'm just making is that I guess globally it's a much bigger issue, and therefore by extension, and it has obviously had, the Boston bombing was just a few years ago. There's been several threats and attack and potential attacks that have almost happened or slightly happened that could be attributed to the same thing. So it's not like terrorist attacks never fucking happened. All that happened was 9/11. I mean that's also kind of an ignorant standpoint to take.
I mean, I asked you for other issues that were caused by Muslims in the United States, and you couldn't name a single one. So I mean,
okay, I don't think that there's any every day-to-day policy enacted.
Okay, what about week to week or month to month?
Right, and month to month, year to year, I would say that yes, it should
This
be
guy
it
is
should
more
be
dismantled
concerning.
than Flight 93.
The poll data that how.
So I give you
radical subgroups
mainstream
are,
politicians, vice president and president of the United States that are enacting real policy that will have a detrimental impact in the United States. And your counterclaim to that is, well, Pew Research polls show that some Muslims in the West have fucked up ideas. That's your counterclaim.
No, that's not my counterclaim.
That's what it sounded like, because you just said, well, polls, that was your counterclaim.
Yes, but my point with that is just to say that there is clearly an ideological based issue that derives from radical Islamic problems.
Okay, but you haven't given me any of those issues.
I mean, what, like, the fucking...
I know what you want to say. You're going to say, like what? But there are none. That's the awkward part, isn't it? That's the problem.
What do you mean, man? Like, because I don't even, like, is that a real question? Like, have you
I don't know. I gave you issues with radical Christianity that, to some extent, is the mainstream in the Western right-leaning thought.
Do you think that all of these fucking attacks, all of these cultural issues where we're seeing these cultural clashes we're seeing in Europe, all over the Middle East.
I'm talking about the United States. That's why you're here.
Yes, I know you're talking about the United States. I'm aware you're talking about the United States. I'm saying that these things that are happening other places in the world, there's a world out there other than just the U.S.
But you're not here. We're not here to talk about the rest of the world. We're talking about the United States.
Right.
The rest of the world is a whole
And
different
by
conversation.
extension, okay, the U.S. isn't on some like plane of existence that's separate from the rest of the world.
We
So by
are. We have a
extension-
thing called an ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, that separates us from the rest of the world.
Okay. You're kind of being closed-minded on this. Like, sure, yes, of course we have a fucking ocean. Do you not realize? Okay, then how did 9/11 happen? How did fucking the Boston bombing happen?
They're planes. They can
how did
fly
the
across
Christmas
the
Day
ocean.
bombing happen? How did any of this shit happen? And we have an ocean, dog. Like, what are you talking about? Okay, my point is just to say that political fucking issues affecting the greater parts of the world on a huge scale certainly are an issue for the United States. It's not a day-to-day issue like the policies enacted by conservatives, which you're saying are heavily influenced by the Bible, which I would say, that's arguable on certain points how much that is or isn't. Yeah, it's a completely different fucking scope of an issue. So I don't know, man. You're trying to like make me look like an idiot by saying, oh, well, like day to day, Muslims aren't putting in laws. Like, obviously, they're not fucking putting in laws, man. But I'm talking about as a scope of an issue. Radical Islam is a much bigger issue than radical Christians. Now, if you want to talk about laws enacted, which you could attribute to basically being radical Christianity, okay, then that's a different way of framing it. But I'm just talking about the way I'm talking about it is.
So I guess here is my problem. I said Christians are having a far more destructive impact on the U.S. right now than Muslims by far. And you said that is such an absurd notion and it would require some pretty cherry-picked logic. Radical Islam has by far caused more issues, but you can't give me any of those issues.
Yes, that's what I feel like you've done. Is if you're gonna attribute a lot of these basically just conservative policies to, again, I know that conservative. Christians are very vastly majority conservative and all that. If you're gonna basically attribute all these things to Christianity itself, then that's one way to frame it. And again, that's arguable to the extent.
But that's not. You're trying to dismiss what I said. You're saying that's one way to frame it. You agreed with me earlier that these issues are religious.
I agree that the majority of people voting on those issues are religious.
So this is a Christian problem.
It depends on the issue, man. Like, again, contraception, I would say that's definitely like mostly influenced by the Bible for sure.
And you agreed about abortion as well. You said that if most Christians were atheists, that they probably wouldn't be an issue.
I agreed that the majority of people voting for abortion are definitely voting
against abortion.
Against abortion are definitely Christian. Yeah, that's definitely. But that doesn't mean that. Again, that doesn't mean that being pro-life requires any sort of religious thing. But I mean, again, that's a topic of population.
All right. Okay. Listen, I'll give you the last word. Okay, because I have to go to the bank because it closes
Okay,
in 24
yeah.
minutes. Okay, go for it.
Okay.
Summarize.
I will try to summarize this really quickly. First of all, I feel like we got a little bit derailed. I just the thesis of what I'm saying is basically just that is radical Islam is much bigger of a threat than radical Christianity. And the antithesis, the really just like the crux of what I mean, and maybe I misspoke a little bit on Twitter. Like, if you're going to frame it in terms of policy enactment, for sure, I agree. Christianity has more of an influence. I agree with you. I agree with a lot of what you said. I just think that comparing the two religions, especially in terms of extremism, is it's completely inaccurate when you really look at the text, when you really look at the religious influence. But anyways, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think we had some common ground, and I'll concede. I'll concede a bit. Yeah, I'll concede that policy enactment definitely is more Christian. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
All right,
And,
I love you. I appreciate you. I'm glad you came on, and we could talk again. I'll talk to you
right,
later,
see you,
buddy.
man.
Okay.
Later.
All right. I need to go to the bank and get a fucking voided check because for some reason, that's the only way you can approve your account and routing number.